Even though the large vehicle was rapidly approaching, she tried to drive as gently as she could while maintaining her composure. She had seen the tiny, dark object rushing in front of it, and it had made her shiver hysterically. She was baffled as to how such a lovely day could have gone wrong. But with every second that passed, things only became worse. Lizzie merely wanted to get out of her cramped home that morning and see her friend who lived outside of town when she made the decision to go for a drive. She had not even been in her car for a minute when she noticed the truck heading straight towards her. When she noticed the tiny thing rushing in front of the car, she was still trying to make sense of what was occurring. Elizabeth Keeley, or as her best friends call her Lizzie, was an exceptionally cautious person. She had an adorable 3-year-old daughter and an amazing husband. Every aspect of Lizzie's life had been made as perfect as possible. For the longest time, she was successful in pursuing her academic goals, professional aspirations, and personal goals. But what would transpire that day on the journey would be wild and totally unexpected. As the city's local dentist and cat mom, Lizzie had gained notoriety. She had carved out the perfect bit of happiness in North Dakota with her partner Brad and daughter Kim. With another child on the way, Lizzie's life was perfect. She was unaware of the magnitude of how a car accident would affect everything she had fought so hard to create. The incident occurred 2 days before the birth of her second child. It was a long and tiring week, despite spending the time at home due to maternity leave. However, she was growing restless and couldn't wait to get back to work. She wanted to get out of the house more than anything. She had been stuck at home for a whole week, and she needed a break desperately. She told her husband to watch their daughter for a few hours before gathering her things and walking to her car. She made sure that everything was perfect with the family car before heading out. She pulled out of the driveway as carefully as she could. She needed to be extra cautious due to her stomach being in the way. What awaited her? There was a mystery to her. Lizzie drove around the neighborhood before going on the interstate. She did not enjoy driving on the highway, but it was the most efficient way to reach her friend's house. There was barely a car in sight, and she found it strange as it was usually filled with cars. Lizzie noticed a shriek of metal ahead while her attention was on the highway. Lizzie's eyes pierced the section of road in front of her. On the opposite side of the street, a red truck sputtered in her direction. Before it, a tiny dark thing moved quickly. Lizzie focused more intently on the thing in front of her. Before it, a tiny dark thing moved quickly. Lizzie focused more intently on the thing in front of her. Before it went near enough for her to get a decent look, she'd assumed it was a motorbike. When she recognized what it was, her heart leaped in her chest. Lizzie was traveling at a pace of about 35 miles per hour when she became aware of the impending object. The truck's back tire was shaking as it drew nearer by the minute. Knowing the numerous scary stories involving tires blowing out on highways, Lizzie paused at the wheel. She was acquainted with a man who held a sorrowful cry after having his life taken by a road tire. When things started to become worse, she hadn't even reacted properly. Before Lizzie, the red truck swayed erratically and then overturned. Its enormous trailer extended into Lizzie's lane and took up the entire width of the highway. The truck would hit her if the tire missed her. As she sped up her lane change and hit the brake, Lizzie did so out of reflex. She covered her mouth as the fast-moving tires sped by her. She continued to be in the path of the truck. Lizzie continued driving away from the lane until her car was on the dirt. The trailer skidded past her as the tire had, and Lizzie pressed on the brake pedal fully until her vehicle came to a stop. She struggled out of her car, hurrying to see if whoever was driving the truck was hurt. The massive vehicle had come to a stop after scrapping the road for minutes. Lizzie reached the cab and called out. What happened next left her stunned. Since the truck had tipped over, she couldn't pry the door open. She called out again, running to the front of the truck and banging a rock against the windshield until it cracked and a man came out. He had a bleeding cut and a bump on his forehead. Stumbling toward Lizzie, he asked if she was okay. She was about to answer when a sharp pain shot through her lower belly. Her eyes widened as a single thought seared her mind. The baby's coming early. The pain reshot through Lizzie's belly, firing toward her thighs. Her lower abdomen contracted with pain as her water broke. But before she could say anything, the man sprung into action. He limped to Lizzie and carefully helped her back to her car. Wincing in pain, he insisted he could drive and promised to get her to the delivery room. The pain burning through Lizzie's body had become too much by now. She breathed in and out, hoping they'd reach the hospital in time. The man drove them back to town, his focus glued to the road before them. The blood from his arm had reduced, but he seemed in more pain than he was letting on. They reached the hospital, and he flew out of the car, returning with nurses and a stretcher. Lizzie's doctor called her family after the hospital booked her in and commenced her delivery. Everything went smoothly, and Lizzie and her family welcomed their fourth family member. But as they left the following day, Lizzie saw a familiar face waiting for them. The man she helped out of the truck was smiling at the end of the hall. His arm was in a sling and his head was wrapped in bandages. He thanked Lizzie for getting him out of the truck, informing her that it blew up shortly after they left the scene. Lizzie thanked him for bringing her to the hospital despite his injuries. She didn't know what she would have done if he wasn't there to help her.